Hi everyone, my name is Delaney Reynolds and I am a 21-year-old climate activist from Miami, Florida, as well as the founder and CEO of the Sink or Swim project. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone at It's Time for having me, but especially Sam, who has been so kind in walking me through everything and helping me. So thank you all for having me, and thank you to the audience for being here with us today. Like I said, I'm a climate activist, so today I want to talk to each of you about some of the things that I've learned when it comes to climate change and some of the things that I've been able to accomplish in my communities because of my climate activism work, and hopefully how you can achieve them as well in your very own communities. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, once again, thank you for having me. Let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, my name is Delaney, and I am just like all of you. When I started my climate activism journey, I was about 14 years old. And in fact, I loved everything having to do with the environment, whether it was fishing, kayaking, swimming, learning about marine science as a whole. So if you love those things, I'm just like you. I also love music. This is a picture of me in the top right with my favorite band. I love sports. I used to play basketball in high school. That's me in the bottom right playing basketball. So once again, I'm just like all of you. Growing up, I was born and raised here in the city of Miami, where I now attend college at the University of Miami. But I split my time between this cosmopolitan, massive city of Miami of millions of people, and a very small 1,000-acre island in the Florida Keys called No Name Key. It's a very special place. It's in the middle of 2 wildlife refuges, and there's only 40 homes on the island, all of which are solar powered. So I grew up learning about sustainability, loving the environment, constantly in the ocean, around the ocean, and that love for nature ultimately led to me writing, illustrating, and publishing 3 children's books on ecology topics based on that island in the Florida Keys. And along the way, as I was researching for those books, I was learning more and more about climate change, how it was impacting the animals, the habitats that I was writing about, and then ultimately Florida as a whole, the United States, the world, and I became extremely concerned about climate change and the impacts that we were going to see moving forward. So what I started to do is I started to interview a bunch of scientists, politicians, business owners, homeowners, because I decided that I wanted to write my 4th book on sea level rise so that I could try to communicate what I saw happening to others. So I learned as much of the science as I could. I spoke to business owners and homeowners to learn how they were being impacted firsthand. I could tell their stories. And I also spoke to politicians to learn what they were doing, if anything, to help mitigate and adapt to our climate crisis. And along the way, I decided that I wanted to take all this information and I wanted to share it with others, just like you, just like me, so that others could learn what I was learning. And from there, I created what I like to call the Sink or Swim project, which today is a nonprofit organization that focuses on the education of climate change topics, as well as political advocacy. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. But to start, I want to go through some of the science so you can kind of understand where my concern was coming from when I first started to learn these things. So as you may know, the population of our planet today is almost 8 billion people on this planet. You can see that here at the end of this blue line. That's where we are today. We're approaching 8 billion. And these are where our population is projected to go in the future, these red, orange, and green lines. Now, what I want you to notice is that all of them are increasing. So our population is predicted to continue to increase. Now, when you have more people, you have more consumption. You have more things like factories and cars, things that emit carbon dioxide. So living in Miami, I see this kind of traffic all the time, and I see emissions like this all the time. It's very common in most large cities, and I'm sure you've probably seen cars emitting carbon dioxides from burning fossil fuels as well. And here's a factory. Of course, most of us have probably seen this as well, emitting carbon dioxide into our atmosphere because it's burning fossil fuels to provide us with energy. So when fossil fuels are burned, carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere. And we know that it's been rising because we can measure the amount of carbon dioxide that's been in our atmosphere for a very long time through things like ice cores or even sediment cores from the deep ocean that show us the amount of carbon that was once in the atmosphere. And what we're seeing from all these measurements, historical and up to today, is that carbon dioxide is increasing. So scientists actually said that we should not surpass 350 parts per million of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. But unfortunately, today we are past 410 parts per million of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Now, what you need to know is that is a dangerous amount. And because it's so high, that is the most important thing that we can do to help solve our climate change crisis. Cut back our carbon emissions, eliminate them as much as possible. Because when you have increased carbon emissions, you also get increased temperatures all over the globe. So we've been able to tell the temperature of our planet since 1880. That's how long we've been keeping record. And if you look at those measurements, what you can see is that since 1990, the temperature of our planet has never dropped below the average. It's been steadily increasing ever since. And that's because carbon dioxide traps extra heat within the Earth's atmosphere, causing this warming. Now, unfortunately, 2014 was the warmest year on record since 1880. Until 2015, broke that record. Until 2016, broke that record. And then 2017 broke another record, 2018 broke another record, 2019 broke another record, and we've already had record-breaking months this year, 2020. So there's no debate. If you can read a thermometer, which I know all of us can, then we can tell that our temperature is increasing all over the planet. Now I want you to look at this graph. This one is one of the most important ones that I will show you today. It's a combination of the temperature and carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. So you can see that this bold line, which is the carbon dioxide, and the temperature, the blue and red, are both increasing at a very similar rate. And that is not a coincidence. That is because these things are correlated. As man uses more fossil fuels, burns more fossil fuels, more carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere, which traps more sun energy, which causes our planet to warm. So looking at this picture, there's three things here that can melt. Now, we've got Greenland here, we've got Antarctica here, and of course we have ice cream. And all of these things are things that melt. Now, we all need to care about Greenland and Antarctica melting just as much as we care about our ice cream melting. And here's why. Ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica, most specifically, are declining at a very rapid rate. These ice sheets cover about 10% of our planet's land mass, and they are crucial environments, not only to the different ecosystems that reside there, but also because they reflect a lot of sun rays back, they help keep our planet cool, and ultimately they also, as they melt, contribute to sea level rise, which is a problem where I'm from, Miami, Florida. So I want to show you two pictures of the same glacier, and I want you to see if you can spot the difference. Here's the first one. So this is the Patterson Glacier in Alaska. And this picture was taken in 1920, so it's black and white. They didn't have color cameras back then. But what I want you to notice is all of the ice here and up here in the mountains. It's a lot of ice, and it's really pretty. But now, if we fast forward 85 years into the future, this is the same glacier. And this is what it looks like because of global climate change and increased temperatures. The planet has warmed so much that all of that ice has melted. So what does that mean for places like where I'm from, like South Florida, or places like Bangladesh, or places like Louisiana? All over the planet, we are seeing what's called sea level rise. So here's a pretty normal house here in Miami. You have your street here, your driveway, you even got a little drainage system there. And after the effects of sea level rise, this is what that same house looks like. So this is a perfectly sunny day, no rain in sight, and salt water has bubbled up through this drainage system and flooded this man's property, so much so that he can actually float in it, which is kind of crazy, but that's what we're seeing all over South Florida. Now here's an example of just last year, the flooding that I saw at a place that is very near and dear to my heart. This place is called Matheson Hammock Park. It's less than a mile away from my home. This is actually where I grew up learning to swim, where my brother learned to swim, where my dad learned to swim. And this is what we're seeing happen to it as a result of sea level rise.
Hey guys!
like you heard me say, that is all salt water. You're looking at Biscayne Bay right now here in Miami, and that water is flooding over a roadway that people walk on, drive golf carts on, into another area of water. And we're seeing this all the time now. In fact, this area is so washed out that they now have it roped off. You can't even access it anymore because it is so damaged from sea level rise. And that's what we're seeing here in South Florida, all over Miami-Dade County, Broward County, Monroe County, and it's only going to get worse. So, like I said, there's two main aspects to the Sink or Swim project. And one of them, the first one, is climate education. And this is perhaps the most important work that I do. I work with kids all over the world, just like every single one of you. And I teach them a lot of the things that I just talked about, the science of climate change, how we can help, solutions that we can implement because of how we're going to be impacted. And what I can tell you is that kids get it. We all get it. We understand the science, sometimes more than most adults. We can read it, we understand it, we know that our future is being threatened, and we know that we have to do everything in our power to solve it. In fact, I often say that climate change is the biggest issue that our generations are ever going to face, and how we go about solving it will define our time here on this planet. So it really is up to you and me, every single one of us, to work together to implement the solutions that we need to save our planet from climate change. So the other aspect of the Sink or Swim project is political advocacy. And the way that I kind of first got started with this was back in 2015. I read a budget that the Miami-Dade County released, that's where I live, and it was 3 volumes, over 1,000 pages long, and it mentioned sea level rise in one sentence. And they didn't plan to allocate any money towards the problem. So this made me and a bunch of other children furious. So what we did is a group of us went out and we actually spoke in front of the commission, in front of the mayor, and we asked them to do something about sea level rise. So here's the speech that I gave that day. It's not too long, but I like to call it raindrops.
Hi, my name is Delaney Reynolds. I go to Palmer Trinity School in Palmetto Bay. I'd like to comment on the budget and sea level rise. As I drove here, it was raining. And as it rained, I imagined that there were millions of raindrops falling from the sky. In fact, there probably were. And as I thought about coming here, those raindrops were a metaphor for your $6.8 billion budget. And I thought to myself that just one of those drops is equal to the small amount of money which you are allocating in the budget towards mitigating sea level rise. First, there was little to nothing. Then, $75,000. And I think I heard today about $300,000 were allocated. I'd like to suggest that that's not enough, that our community and environment deserve more. And in fact, I respectfully ask that you increase this line item to $1 million, and certainly nothing less than $500,000. What I've not told you yet is that I am the founder of an educational initiative related to educating children about sea level rise, entitled Sink or Swim, my website being miamisearise.com. And that through my work with this initiative, I can tell you that children, future voters, and their families, current voters, are deeply concerned about sea level rise. I implore you to show the world that Miami-Dade County is serious about sea level rise and dramatically increase your expenditure in this year's budget. We need to stop talking about it and start taking action to work together to address the catastrophe that our community faces. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you so very much.
So that very same day that a group of youth went out and spoke to the commission and mayor, they allocated $300,000 towards sea level rise. They also created a brand new position, a chief resilience officer at the county level. And I've worked with him a lot ever since. What's even cooler is that later that same year, they increased the budget for sea level rise mitigation to $1 million. And today, it's actually closer to $2 million. So that shows you that someone of any age, even without a vote, can use their voice and make a difference in their community when it comes to politics. Here's another example. When I was a little bit older, but still not able to vote here in the United States. So like I said, I grew up part-time in a solar-powered home. And a few years ago, I learned about some laws in California that mandated that homes and businesses put solar panels on their roofs upon construction. And I thought that that was pretty cool. And because Florida is nicknamed the Sunshine State, I thought that that would be something that would be perfect to do here. So what I did is I wrote a letter to about a dozen mayors here in South Florida asking if they would be interested in incorporating something similar in their municipalities. And the mayor of South Miami, Philip Stoddard, was the first to respond. He was super enthusiastic about the idea, absolutely loved it, and was totally down to do it under one condition. I had to help him write the law. Now, of course, I've never written a law. I didn't really know anything about laws back then. But he and I sat together, worked endlessly, hours on hours, taking the codes in California, changing them, molding them to fit the ones in South Miami, and ultimately, we had our very first draft. Later on in 2017, the law actually passed in the city of South Miami, making it the first law in the state of Florida and making Florida the second state in the United States to have such a law. And what the law requires is that any new construction of a home or material renovation over 75% must install the maximum amount of solar panels possible on its roof. And again, I was 16, 17 at the time of working on this law, and when it passed, it's still in South Miami today. And that, once again, shows you that anyone, no matter what your age is, as long as you're passionate, you can work towards something, even in politics. You can make a difference. Here's another example of some political advocacy work, but on the state level here in Florida. These are 7 of my friends and I, and this was in April of 2018, the day that we sued the state of Florida, the governor of Florida, the commissioner of agriculture, and the rest of the cabinet for not upholding their duties that are outlined in something called the Florida Constitution and the Public Trust Doctrine. Now, both of these legal documents basically say that our government officials here in Florida have the duty to protect our environment by not letting fossil fuels and carbon dioxide pollute our environment. It's that easy. So what they're doing is, obviously, they're using fossil fuels and they're pumping carbon dioxide into our atmosphere, and they are not upholding their duties that are outlined in these documents. So we're suing the state and we're asking them to cut back our carbon emissions, ultimately to hopefully eliminate them in the hopes that we can work towards a cleaner environment here in Florida. Now, what's interesting is that while we filed in April of 2018, we didn't have our first hearing until June 2020, just a few months ago. And that's because politics got in the way many times. We were reassigned a judge a couple times, but ultimately we had our day in court. And the judge of that case, he dismissed it. However, we are in the process of appealing it, and hopefully we'll move forward from there. We think that we have a really good shot. Of course, this is something that's very hard to do. There are children in many other states here in the United States and even at the federal level who are working towards the same cause. But there's totally hope, because what's great is that children outside of the United States in other countries like Colombia and the Netherlands have actually succeeded in their similar court cases in getting their governments to protect the environment for a better future. So we have tremendous hope moving forward that our government will listen to us and work with us to create a more clean environment. Another way is kind of on a more global level. So the more you continue to work on whatever it is you're passionate about, the more people are going to listen to you and want to share your story. So here, I was very fortunate and honored to work with former Vice President Al Gore, where he actually created an MTV special that was aired right before the release of his latest book and movie and inconvenient sequel, Truth to Power. And what we did is we met together in New York and we spoke in front of an audience of other college students, local college students in New York, and we answered their questions about climate change. And so that day, I'll show you the clip in just a second, I got to speak to a bunch of children. And the day that it aired, MTV also let me take over their Snapchat account. And here's the video of the story that I posted that day. You can check it out on my YouTube channel. But basically, I was talking about hard science, the science of climate change, walking them around Miami Beach where there's a bunch of construction because they're raising roads, they're installing pumping stations to help with sea level rise. And I stopped counting at about 3 million people watching my stories. Me, watching my stories about climate change. And that shows you that people are interested in whatever you have to say, even if it's hard science, even if it's about what is happening locally. And that's not just with climate change, whether you're passionate about equality or gun laws or racial justice, anything like that. Use your voice, speak up and out, because people will want to listen to what you have to say. So here's the clip from that day in New York.
There's a young activist in Miami who isn't willing to stand by and watch sea levels rise. Fat Joe was in his adopted hometown and met with Delaney Reynolds, the founder of the Sink or Swim Project, an organization that's tackling this issue head-on by educating other young people and pushing for policy change.
I'm so intrigued by your story. Why are you so involved with the climate change?
The city of Miami Beach has already been seeing the effects of sea level rise. People can't drive through the streets, people can't walk on the sidewalks because during high tide, the sea is rising and flooding all of that. Miami Beach does have a potential of being underwater and extinct.
I've been living in Miami for over 14 years. I love it here. Do you honestly believe that there's gonna come a time where the whole Miami Beach could be wiped out?
Definitely. It's possible if we don't start solving this problem right now. So in approximately 45 years, seas are definitely going to rise 2 to 3 feet because of the damage that we've already done to our environment.
So if we were standing in this spot right here, the water would be up to here right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. What do you think an average person can do to be productive towards reversing the damage that's being done?
Go to your local government and ask them what they are doing to address climate change. In 2015, the Miami-Dade County budget didn't plan to allocate any money towards climate change and sea level rise, and I was obviously furious about that. I went in front of the entire commission and the mayor.
Our community and environment deserve more, and in fact, I respectfully ask that you increase this line item to $1 million.
Although they didn't agree to my $1 million request, they did allocate $300,000. And the budget for this year is actually $1.7 million.
It's a real thing, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that climate change is honestly the biggest problem that my generation will ever face.
That was just a little clip from the show. You can watch the whole thing on YouTube, and the rest of that clip is also on my YouTube channel. And from there, I have been given even more crazy, insane opportunities. For example, here, I'm speaking in front of the General Assembly at the United Nations in New York, where I and a bunch of other youth, as you can see behind me, presented a pledge that we created called Our Oceans Pledge to the General Assembly. And we asked dignitaries and excellencies to sign it in order to protect our ocean for future generations. And it was really cool. We got to meet a bunch of them. For example, here is Prince Albert II of Monaco and Adrian Grenier, who is an environmental steward for the United Nations, signing our pledge. So it was a tremendous honor. I got to represent the Everglades National Park, which is a park down here in Florida. And it was an amazing, humbling experience. I could not be more thankful to have that experience there. Another great way to educate people about your different passions is through writing a blog or through social media. So here, for example, is my blog, Delaney's blog, where I send a periodic blog out to tens of thousands of people. And a lot of people like to read it, and they like to listen to what I have to say, whether it's about politics in this case, or the science of climate change or the impacts of climate change. And I promise you that, like I've said, people are going to want to listen to what you have to say as well. So please don't ever be afraid to use your voice to speak up and out in favor of the things that you are passionate about. Please work with others to solve our climate change crisis, whether it's your peers, whether it's government officials. There are so many ways that we can work together and start to combat our climate change crisis. Thank you again for having me today. If you would like to learn more, you can check out our website, miamisearise.com, or follow us on social media. And you can also reach out to me if you want to collaborate or work together. I would love to do that. Once again, thank you so much for having me. It has been an absolute honor.